Hello. I'm going to talk to you today about an important concept in Qi Gong, which is active consciousness. When you're doing Qigong practices in Qi Gong and in many other schools of Qigong, it's essential that you're doing them using the active consciousness. Now, first, what is the active consciousness? So everybody is conscious in certain ways and to certain degrees, but there are different kinds of consciousness. And a lot of times you might just be going through life, going through activities on this kind of automatic where you're not really there, you're not really present, you're just repeating, especially if it's stuff in your everyday routine. And anything that you start doing on a regular basis, there's a risk that you start doing it automatically, right? So when you wake up, if you prepare your cereal or whatever you're eating, and even reading the paper, I mean, you're not necessarily, unless you see something really surprising in the paper, you're not showing up, you're not present to see it, you're just going through it all. And the active consciousness is just not there. You've got this kind of low-grade consciousness. So in Qigong, we differentiate between that low-grade consciousness and what we call the active consciousness, which I have, not just here, but in general in my teaching, referred to as showing up. This is when you're actually present. You're actually there in the moment, engaging actively in what is in front of you, right? And so this happens to everyone. Everyone has moments, probably throughout their day, there are different moments where you show up for one reason or another. Usually it's because of something unusual that happens and that surprises you. Sometimes it seems to happen just spontaneously by accident. A difference between regular people, you could say, and people who are practicing mysticism of any kind, including cultivation, is that one of the early goals is to be able to show up intentionally, not just through accidents of things that happen. Okay, so not just that you're usually going on neutral and then there's, you know, a loud noise or something and you show up because you hear that noise and you're wondering what it is, right? You're not showing up just by accident. When you're a practitioner, you're showing up intentionally. So this sometimes is a little bit hard because we're not used to showing up. We want to switch back into neutral as quickly as possible. We want to go right back onto automatic state and not be paying attention at that level of the active consciousness. One of the things you have to develop when you're practicing Qi Gong is to maintain the active consciousness throughout your exercises. At first, when you're just starting, that is actually easier to do in some ways because you have to, because it's a new thing, right? So you have to learn the movements, the technical parts of how to move, of where to go this way, or now I'm going that way, or how am I holding my hands when I'm going up like this, or whatever like that, or when I'm coming down like this, and you have to pay more attention. But once you get the technical movements, and the technical movements in Qi Gong are not very hard, the temptation exists that you're going to slip back into it, and suddenly you're just making all the hand movements, all the turning to one side or the other, all the practices just kind of automatically, and meanwhile you're thinking about something totally different. You're stuck out there in another space, or not really about anything at all. So one of the things you have to train after the initial learning of the technical parts of the practice is how to maintain yourself in the active consciousness. And this is very important to us in Qi Gong because Qi Gong is not just a health Qigong, it's not a Qigong for some other purpose. It's a Qigong for the transformation of our consciousness, for self-transformation. It's an internal alchemy practice. And that means that our goal is to change our consciousness, to change our perceptions, to become vaster, to manifest the superior individual, as it's called in the I Ching, that is to say, that higher self of us, rather than the inferior personality, which is that part of us that is just a mishmash of influences. So to find our true will, and eventually to achieve enlightenment, that state of transformation where you have become united to what we would call the Yi Fa, to all that is manifested, when you've connected to reality. So this is a big task, right? And it's a task that can only be done with the active consciousness. If you're practicing Qi cultivation without the active consciousness, there's only one of two things going on. Either no cultivation is actually happening, or the cultivation that's happening is happening to some other entity, to some other element than your actual consciousness. So you could be doing Qi Gong that is cultivating the body. You could do Qi Gong that is doing secondhand cultivation for some teacher or something like that. There are other Qi Gong schools that do that, and the promise is the great teacher will give you good health or something like that, and then in exchange you're doing these practices that are a form of cultivation for that teacher rather than for yourself. Or you could be doing cultivation for some kind of an archetypal force. So for example, if you're practicing some kind of cultivation practice that is devotional, that is towards a certain deity, which is to say a certain concept, then you're cultivating for the sake of that concept or that deity, but not for inner transformation. The inner transformation only happens if the active consciousness is present. And the more you're in the active consciousness, when you're doing the Qi Gong, when you're doing Qi breathing, when you're doing the sitting meditation, when you're doing any part of Yi Fa Qi Gong, the better your cultivation becomes. And it's only through active consciousness that the Qi can be used to develop De, to develop virtue, which in turn leads to the development of Gong, of that enlightenment level, where you connect to those celestial forces and not just the terrestrial energy, which is Qi. So it's very important. And the key is, it's very simple also, but it just means it's just like any muscle that you've let atrophy. Depending on how much or how little you've used the active consciousness in your life, at first it might be very hard to keep bringing yourself back, to keep showing up again and again as you do the practice. So you're doing the practice, you're in the stillness position here or down here, you're standing with the Qian mudra, doing what should be meditation, but really you're millions of miles away somewhere. You're thinking of tomorrow's supper or something like that. And then you realize that, bring yourself back into the body. The body is the anchor for the active consciousness in Yi Fa Qi Gong. So you've got something right there, which is to say your body, a part of your own being, that because Qi Gong is a body practice, it involves posture, it involves movement, it involves breathing, it makes it very easy, once you get the hang of it, to retain the active consciousness. All you have to do is remember your body. So remember your body, and the active consciousness comes back into the body. And don't castigate yourself, don't punish yourself for being distracted or something like that. Just be back in the body and keep doing that. And the more you do it, the easier it is to stay in the body, to notice and pay attention to every movement that you're doing, of any motion that is going on, and to remain there. And the more you do that, the more effective and powerful your cultivation becomes, and you can begin the process of the transformation of Qi into virtue. So be sure to remember that in your practice and see what a difference it makes when you're showing up for the practice. It's not enough just to do it. If you're going to do it, which you should, then you might as well show up for it, right? Okay.